South Africa communities speak out against the presence of small-scale illegal miners.
Over 190 world leaders attending the United Nations Climate Conference in Dubai approve a deal to help countries facing climate change.
Help for people living with albinism in Zimbabwe. A charity group raises funds for sunscreen to help prevent skin cancer.
Hello, and thank you for staying tuned to the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Bukola Koka at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm being joined by Vincent Makori from Voice of America in Washington, D.C.
Thanks, I'm Vincent Makori at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Channels Television brings you that story.
Over 190 world leaders are attending the United Nations Climate Conference, COP28. Delegates at the conference approved a deal on a new fund that will help countries cope with the impact of climate change. The adoption of the agreement comes during the first day of the talks that will focus on the global stocktake and the phase-out of fossil fuels, as well as build-up of renewable energy. Earlier, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Simon Steele, told delegates that countries need to accelerate climate action because communities around the world depend on it. Our correspondent, Ayola Kasim, who is in Dubai, has the details.
I declare His Excellency Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber elected President of the 28th session of the Conference of the Parties.
The man not just expected not to lead a talk on climate change, being the CEO of the United Arab Emirates State Oil and Gas Company. He has also been accused of having a deal with players in the fossil fuel industry. When he eventually took over the mantle at the opening of the conference, he stated his mission.
For my part, I pledge that I will run an inclusive and transparent process, one that encourages free and open discussion between all parties.
He scored his first win at the conference with the agreement to establish the Loss and Damage Fund. This comes after the Transitional Committee agreed on a set of recommendations, but some still see the progress as being too slow.
We are taking baby steps, stepping far too slowly from an unstable world that lacks resilience to working out the best responses to the complex impacts that we are facing.
Winning economies from fossil fuel has been a thorny issue at these conferences. Nigeria, as one of those dependent on it, is seeking deals to help the transition plan.
This is an ETP, Energy Transition Plan, that has been put in place as far back as just last year, 2022. And we've spent this last 1 year, laying the foundations and then preparing all the necessary groundworks that will make the project attractive for what? For investment.
The UAE president is hosting the World Climate Action Summit on the 1st and 2nd of December. President Tinubu is expected to join other world leaders to build on decisions their countries have made in previous conferences. From the venue of COP28 in Dubai, Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
And joining us now for more insights on the ongoing COP28 in Dubai is environmental activist and director, Health of Mother Earth Foundation, Nemo Bassi. Hello, Mr. Bassi. Good to see you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, as we start off, how does the newly approved Damage and Loss Fund for Climate Change impact differ from existing initiatives? And in addition to that, what specific measures are in place to ensure its efficient and equitable distribution among countries?
Well, it was really quite exciting to see that in the very first day of the Conference of Parties, countries could agree on the on putting the loss and damage fund into practice. But the challenge we have is that the fund itself ought to be clearly defined as a fund to pay for very deep damage done to communities, to nations, to territories from years of destructive extraction. And then it ought to be predicated on the justice principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, which means that we do know that some people who have created the problem, and they should be the ones who should do the most to pay for that damage. Well, on the first of the COP, we had 400 million donated or pledged. At this moment, it's close to 800 million, but that is still a drop in the bucket, a drop in the ocean. So we see it as an idea that has been adopted, as interesting, but we are really concerned that the very first large amount donated was not by a country that is historically responsible for taking up the carbon budget and pumping greenhouse gas to the atmosphere.
How will the fund, will the leaders ensure the equitable distribution of the fund that has come in so far, particularly among the countries that need it the most?
That is the biggest challenge. And some countries, who have not really contributed much, countries like Pakistan, countries like India, countries like Nigeria, other countries in Africa, they're very concerned that the definition of those who would be, who could access the funds may make it so difficult for some countries to be a part of that. And this is the major concern, because now the definition, the challenge would be, how do you define the most impacted nations? How do you define the most vulnerable nations? And so every country is going to try to show that they are the most impacted or they are the most vulnerable. And then if you restrict the funding to a particular region, maybe a region in the global south, you may exclude other nations who are equally affected. And this is why we're thinking that the best way to go forward is to look at the historical responsibility and then look at the current reality.
And in your view, Mr. Bassi, how will this fund contribute to building resilience, particularly in vulnerable regions, and support adaptation efforts, especially considering the increasing frequency and severity of climate-related events?
Two of the major contending issues at the climate negotiations are the mitigation and adaptation. Now, a lot of emphasis has been laid on mitigation, maybe rightly, but adaptation has not had enough attention. If we want to help poor, vulnerable nations to build resilience, there has to be a lot of investment in adaptation. People are experiencing flooding, people are experiencing droughts, this water stress everywhere, coastal erosion, desertification. These issues, the adaptation to those challenges must be key if we are going to build resilience. And the major way this can be achieved also is to bring the grassroots voices to the table.
What role do you now see the media playing in raising awareness about the existence and utilization of this climate change fund?
We need to have the media embedded in communities. We need to have much more grassroots reporting. Media is not just visiting places once in a while, but actually following how people are surviving. The story of survival must be told. When the last flooding hit Nigeria in 2022, the last major crisis that we had, some of our colleagues were trapped in communities that were cut off. And they spent that time studying the adaptation modes of communities who were stranded in the flood. The media should pick up such approaches, going into disaster areas and telling the story of what is going on so that the world would know. It's very easy for people to forget about things that are not in the media. So the media has to bring the stories of climate disaster front, right, left, right, and center to the hearing and to the side before the eyes of everyone. In Nigeria, we have the case. Gas flaring should come regularly on TV, in the newspapers, on the radio. Issues like the burning oil well at Ororo 1 oil field off the coast of Ondo State that's been burning and spilling for 3.5 years should be something that should come up regularly. This way, the media will help everyone to know that, look, there's a need somewhere that cannot be ignored.
Sustained reporting there. And just before we let you go, Mr. Bassi, how optimistic are you that the approved fund will lead to tangible outcomes, particularly in terms of mitigation and adaptation to the impacts of climate change across different nations? Management of leadership there.
I would only be optimistic if the funding is coming from the polluters who created the problem. But so far, the polluters are shifting back, dancing backwards, backsliding rather than going forward. And so those who are historically responsible for the pollution, for the crisis, have to be substantial source of money on the table. We can't be working with so far less than 1 billion. We need up to 400 billion a year to tackle the problems every year, to build resilience and help communities that are badly impacted by global warming. Nations are going under the flood. People are losing their land to desertification or to coastline erosion, coastal erosion. And so if we are going to be optimistic, the funding has to be on the table. So far, we don't see this happening.
And beyond waiting for the polluters, we hope that, going forward, global citizens will live responsibly and leaders at home will respond, more quickly. Thank you very much, Mr. Bassi. Mr. Nemo Bassi is an environmental activist, and he's also the director, Health of Mother Earth Foundation. Thank you for your time on Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
The International Coffee Organization says Kenya is the 5th largest coffee producer in Africa. But like farming communities around the world, Kenya's coffee farmers are being increasingly squeezed by climate change, price fluctuations, and now a real estate boom. Francis Otoma reports from Kenya's capital, Nairobi.
This is Kiambu area, nestled south of Nairobi, a cornerstone of Kenya's coffee industry. But with massive harvests from India and Indonesia flooding the market, prices are down, and some farmers are getting out of the business of farming and becoming landlords instead. Modern houses now stand where coffee bushes once thrived, and farmers like 57-year-old Joseph Ndongo believe it's the only rational choice to survive in today's economy.
Coffee is now being overtaken by the real estate because, one, real estate has a good earning. You are getting this money every month. In the coffee, you get it. This is a perennial crop. You'll get it once in a year. So you see, real estate is more better than doing coffee or tea.
Just a few years ago, these lands were covered in thriving coffee plantations. Now towering apartment buildings have taken their place, with billboards advertising land for sale at every turn. Most local farmers' cooperative societies are in disarray, like the Gadhuirini factory, which serves over 700 farmers. Coffee beans sit in sacks collected from farmers several weeks ago, but have yet to be collected by the millers for processing, says Samuel Masharia.
Cooperatives are dying out of loans because there are so much loans that were taken when coffee was a big business. And now that the production has gone down, cooperatives are finding it difficult to meet and pay these loans.
Some economists like Vincent Kimosop say the cooperatives need better leadership and government support.
They need to address the governance issues in those areas so that those who are practicing in the space could actually gain and benefit from such a practice, because demand for coffee is still there. And you can see there are countries that have gotten it right, like in the Latin Americas, that are able to reap foreign exchange, employment creation, and they contribute significantly to their economies.
The Kenyan government says coffee production in the country has plummeted from about 130,000 metric tons annually in the 1980s to only 50,000 metric tons in 2022. Francis Ontomwa, VOA News, Nairobi, Kenya.
It's time now for a short break, and as we do, let's remind you to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. And still to come, in Egypt, the Imotep Museum in the Saqqara necropolis reopens. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Founded in the 1886, following the discovery of gold, Johannesburg, South Africa, eventually became the biggest gold producer throughout the 20th century, thanks to its Witwatersrand basin gold fields. But many of the old gold mines have closed, replaced by small-scale illegal miners and an array of social problems. Jan Bonman reports.
George Harrison Park, west of Johannesburg, was the site where the park's namesake first found gold in 1886, a discovery that fueled the rise of South Africa's largest city. But the heritage site has since become unsafe in recent years, as illegal miners, colloquially known as Zamazamas, have decided to try their luck in abandoned mine shafts. Residents of the nearby Reveille community are living in fear as members of rival Zamazama gangs, many of them immigrants from neighboring countries, fight over the old mines.
It's mostly moving around in your own community, living in fear, especially when we see such large groups of people walking. And when they walk, we'll either turn around because we're scared, and we are women, we've got families, or we would stand a distance and watch them cross before we can walk, because we don't want to walk in between them. They are also, we're not sure if they're violent because we don't engage with them.
Reveille residents recently staged a protest over the turf wars, calling for more visible policing and more resources to improve security in the low-income community.
So we are not feeling actually not safer. There are tension, but I can say from a scale from 10, it is now, say, it's sitting on 8. We are caught in between because of it's on our territory. It's in our personal category of our presence, because you must understand, people are going to work in the morning. They don't choose to fight it, the fighting happens anytime.
South African Minister of Police Becky Mandela has vowed to clamp down against the Zamazamas and illegal mining activity in the area. While residents welcome the sentiment and increased police presence in recent weeks, some still live in fear. And the turf wars are not just confined to Reveille. Illegal mining syndicates have cropped up all across Johannesburg's east and west strand. Many Zamazamas are just ordinary people trying to eke out a living in a country struggling with a record 33% unemployment rate, an ongoing electricity crisis, and rising costs. But violent criminals have also forced their way into the illicit gold trade. There are regular reports of gun battles between rival syndicates, with bodies often dumped next to main roads. There was a renewed focus on the violence in Reveille after the bodies of 5 Zamazamas were discovered in August.
And so there's a war between syndicates for the control over the production of gold from that particular area. So that has then led to conflict where Zamazamas have started shooting at each other to control the pits that are around Reveille, and there are some 26 or 27 pits from the old Crown mines. And so the residents are concerned because their property values are collapsing as a result of the conflict around them, and they can get hit by stray bullets.
A police spokesperson said Operation Chanela, an initiative targeting high-density and crime hotspots throughout the country, has seen more than 1,200 suspected illegal miners arrested since April. Jan Borman, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Antiquities authorities in Egypt have opened the Imotep Museum in Saqqara necropolis after completing development works. Saqqara, to the south of the Giza pyramids, has provided a steady stream of archaeological discoveries in recent years. The mission has been excavating in the area since 2018.
According to officials, the museum is dedicated to Imotep, the ancient Egyptian architect who built the Saqqara pyramid, and houses one of the oldest royal mummies in Egypt.
At the heart of this advancement in the sciences of engineering was an Egyptian builder called Imotep. And this museum cherishes and presents the story of Imotep to the world. And it also, on the side of the story of Imotep, it tells the stories of, several stories of how this area of Saqqara continued to evolve over the 30 dynasties in terms of how the buildings were built, how the Egyptians were buried and the interesting stories around all of them.
Saqqara to the south of Giza pyramids has provided a steady stream of archaeological discoveries in recent years. The mission has been excavating in the area since 2018.
All of the artifacts exhibited here are artifacts that were discovered by Egyptian and international missions, scientific missions.
A charity group in Zimbabwe is raising funds for a basic product that is critical for people living with albinism, sunscreen. The group called the Noble Hands of Zimbabwe released a report in September saying 1 in 3 people with albinism in Zimbabwe die of skin cancer before the age of 40, including children as young as 8. Columbus Mavunga has more from Harare, Zimbabwe.
A September report by the charity organization the Noble Hands Zimbabwe says 1 in 3 people living with albinism in Zimbabwe die before they reach 40 due to skin cancer. Now Marvelous Chuma, a musician with albinism, is helping the non-profit group raise funds for a simple but life-saving resource, sunscreen.
Many people with albinism stay in the rural areas, and most of them spend the better part of the day in the sun working in the fields. That exposes their skin and it gets damaged. They don't have the chemicals to tame the heat so that the skin is not burnt off.
So the sunscreen lotions are expensive. The cheapest tube being 15 US per 200 milliliter tube. So it has been quite difficult to have access to sunscreen lotions.
Joichi Famba is a nano-pharmaceutical scientist and professor at the University of Zimbabwe. He says their notion will protect people and cost less.
In Zimbabwe, a typical sunscreen, for example, the leading brands, I can't mention the names, but they cost between 10 and 20 US dollars per bottle. But our unit of solar guard is just going for about 5 to 6 US dollars.
According to the World Health Organization, albinism is a hereditary condition in which little or no melanin is produced, causing a lack of pigmentation in the skin, eyes, and hair. Lack of pigmentation, which protects the skin from radiation from the sun, can leave one vulnerable to skin cancer, says the UN Health Agency.
And they are also encouraged to have a look at themselves, to make regular self-assessments of their skin. Are they developing any unhealthy patches or lumps, something that may worry them?
Early detection allows professionals to better treat diseases such as skin cancer, says the WHO, resulting in fewer deaths. Columbus Mavunga, VOA News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
It's been 10 years since South Africa lost its first democratic president, Nelson Mandela. Tata, or Madiba as he is affectionately known, will always be remembered as a political force who gave up his life in service of South Africa. Our South Africa correspondent Innocent Samosa engaged with some locals to reflect on the life of Madiba. Have a look.
It has been 10 years since the world bid farewell to a global icon and a symbol of resilience, Nelson Mandela. The CEO of Nelson Mandela Foundation, Sello Hatang, says hopefully African leaders will draw inspiration from the icon as visionary leadership is still work in progress in the continent.
Those who are leading now are not leading with the same value system that Madiba had. Sense of selflessness, that you are there as a servant, not as the one who needs to be served, that you are there at the behest of your people. And I think if we are to begin to think like that, it means that we'll be bringing up more servant leaders.
I had the opportunity to speak to locals to hear their thoughts on Nelson Mandela's impact even a decade after his passing.
I wish if maybe we were going to see more changes. Yeah, like now our youth
are in drugs. I think if Utata was alive, I was going to stop all that, because now we don't have youth. Actually, I only see you, who is nice, clean and bath. All our youth are on the street, no job, no nothing. I don't know where is this country taking us to, but I hope Ramaphosa is going to change things.
Okay, I remember him, 1994. It was the first black vote, and then I see a lot of things because of that time. I was young, and then things changed.
Yeah, well, we still remember President Nelson Mandela because he was the hero. We are here and we are united with other people because of him. If it was not Mandela, we were going to struggle up until now. So I think Mandela is a hero and is a legend. Yes, he's an inspiration as a young person, because if it was not Mandela, I was not going to get to work. Because of Mandela, we've got freedom, we're living nice, we are united with white people now.
Well, Nelson Mandela would have been 104 years old this year. On the streets of Johannesburg, he's been celebrated for his contributions in the collaboration of the Bill of Rights and the country's now celebrated constitution. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Do remember, channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I am Bukola Koka. Thank you for watching, and goodbye now.